So today I'm going to be talking about Contagion and Civil War, and how they both kind of represent people acting at the ends of the spectrum of that man faces between like his being and distancing himself from his being that de Beauvoir talks about in Ethics of Ambiguity. So in Contagion, this is a film about essentially an apocalypse narrative about the world ending, and within that, people really just are not able to kind of distance themselves from their being. They're just able to talk about who they're just able to focus on their feelings of fear and protection, and they're not able. It's just like their human emotions, and you really see this have the most effect with people in society, like Dr. Ellis from the CDC, who sort of warns his girlfriend about leaving Chicago before it's supposed to be public. And in doing so, there's sort of this question of whether he betrays his ends, whether betrays he betrays his social role, but is that betraying his ends to presumably help people, as many people as possible, by unfairly telling his girlfriend before anyone else. And you see this a lot throughout the movie of people sort of people in power prioritizing their own family, their wealth, instead of fo- going, instead of focusing on their social roles. And one story that I think has a much more clear cut explanation or I guess sort of ruling on the ethics of it is Dr. Loranta's story. She's a doctor, and at first she's very focused, or sorry, a scientist from the World Health Organization, and she's very focused on fulfilling her social role and responsibility. However, after she has time to assimilate to the village and um, connect with the human beings, we see her in that how she at the end of a scene she sort of gives up her social role of being a scientist at the World Health Organization because that connection, that being in herself and being able to connect with other people, um, allows her to realize that being a scientist at the WHO is not helping her to fulfill her ends, which is presumably to help as many people as she can, and because and so I guess there's like this question throughout the movie of whether this is our societal roles and rules, like whether that does help us fulfill our own ends. Um, and Civil War kind of shows human beings at the opposite end of the spectrum, where they are trying to distance themselves so much by physically having a camera in between them and the violence that other people are suffering, that there's sort of this question if by adhering so much to their social roles of being journalists and observers, of whether they're kind of giving up their humanity in the process. And Lee, who's sort of the older reporter, here in this scene, we can kind of see her put her camera down and just watch. And it's a very powerful scene, whereas Jessie is taking these kind of artistic black and white photos. Presumably, her camera is not in black and white, like just trying to get the best photo. Um, whereas Lee is really sort of grappling with the fact that journalism, which she's done her whole life, is not fulfilling her ends, which is to warn people. And we sort of see, and again, like de Beauvoir talks about this, how, kind of realizing that facing that obstacle can really result in people condemning their past selves, which we see in how she kind of acts towards Jesse. Um, and she kind of becomes very lost and kind of loses her passion, like to fulfill this end. And this is the end of the film. And in this end of the film, we sort of have the climax of the film being where um, the the reporters see their friends killed and really experience these emotions. And the end is sort of in parallel to that, where Jesse and Joel have watched Lee be killed, and they sort of almost emotionlessly um, pursue getting the picture of the president being shot and the president and interviewing the president. And, this is a very important moment of the movie. It sort of zooms in on their faces and on their and the music kind of stops and it's very eerie. And I don't think the twist is that they're bad people suddenly or that they're suddenly evil, but it does show the effect of how eerie it is, of how weird to see people try to distance themselves so much from who they are and try to disclose themselves, as de Beauvoir would say, to the point where they sort of lose the human emotions and the human connection that, in a sense, gives meaning to the ethics that we have. What is the point of being a journalist, of warning people, if you no longer experience any kind of empathy? And, they do show empathy throughout the film, as seen here, where Jesse is crying, but there is just sort of, I think, the question that these two films really bring up is what mindset, how do you balance that